we would like to extend a warm welcome to this international workshop titled The Increase of Discourse Polarization, Politicization of Gender and Autocratic Leadership, which is taking place in a hybrid format in person in Santiago de Chile and Paris, and virtually via Zoom. We are very happy because we are taking now almost 150 attendees. Maricel, Vice President of our RCE in Political Sociology, and I organized this event thanks to the financial support of the International Political Science Association, IPSA. This event is divided in two sessions. We will have presentations from leading experts in their fields. We are honored to have international guests such as María Esperanza Casulo and Rocío Anunciata from Argentina, Isil Turkan from Turkey, and Cassie Esbarapa from India. It's a privilege for me to introduce these presentations, which aim to shed light on discourse polarization, the politicization of gender, and autocratic leadership, both at the level of political parties and within society, as well as international leadership in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. I don't want to be stricter for the rules, but I would like to remind everyone that time limits must be respected. So we have time for discussion after the presentations, which should last no more than 15 minutes. The presentations will begin with our panel from Paris, coordinated by my colleague Maricel. I will now hand over to her so we can begin. Maricel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lucia, for your introduction, your presentation. So I also introduce myself also for the people in this room and the people online. I'm Maricel Rodriguez Blanco. I'm Associate Professor of Sociology at the Institut Catholique de Paris. I am very, very happy to introduce this panel. This first panel of this workshop will address the issue of polarization in a lot of countries. We have Turkey, India, Argentina, and the northern of Europe from different political science perspectives. So two panels will be here with us and two will be online from India and Argentina. I remind you also, as Lucia said, that each presentation should not last more than 15 minutes. 15 minutes. And with Lucia will be strict about time, because if not, we cannot have enough time at the end of each panel. And then at the end of each panel, we have a round of questions from the room and of course online. And we will show we'll show you a little poster with 2 minutes, if you agree, before the end of your presentation. So the first panel will start right away, and we will stop at 4, more or less. We will have a break of 15 minutes, and then we will have the second panel. So without attempting more, I'm glad to introduce Isil Turkan here. On my side, she's an associate professor of political science at Yeditepe University in Turkey. I don't know if I pronounce well. Okay. She will speak on polarization and communication in Turkey. So continuities and discontinuities. And Isil, the floor is yours. You can start. Thank you very much.
So, hello, everyone. Okay, I think my sound and everything goes well. I want to present myself, and I want to thank you, of course, for all this hard work and organization. I am Isil Turkan İpek from Yeditepe University. I am an associate professor on political science. So thank you for having me. Thank you, Maricel, for this hard work and wonderful organization, and Lucia, and hi to Chile as well. So I want to be brief, and I don't want to break the rules, so I will be quick. So I will talk about the polarization in Turkey, and as you see from my title, I'm associating the notion with the concept of a communication. I will talk about what it is, and I will also refer to my two latest publications. So one is an article which will be published in Politique in French, and the other one is my latest book on university students in Turkey, and I'm very interested about the political participation of young people in Turkey, their political engagement, etc. So I will link all these research, and I want to be brief. And the objective here, my point here, is to understand, analyze polarization through, of course, populism, which is a very popular notion that we are referring to, and it's a political rhetoric used by by politicians in Turkey, and also a communication, which is a concept developed by Dominique Volton, a French sociologist. So I think these two are very compatible notions to understand and to analyze polarization. And Turkey, unfortunately, it's a very good example of it. So a communication and populism as a result, but also as factors of polarization, are very crucial to understand in the case of Turkey. And why youth? Because youth is important. Youth is the future of politics in every country. So I want to also understand how new generations, how they react to this polarization, how they understand this communication, how they are affected and influenced by all these phenomena. Populism, that means polarization through populism. So as in different countries we see it. There is an inherent structural polarization in every society. But with populist discourses, these poles, the gap between poles are very widened, especially in Turkey. And populism helps, unfortunately, to the development of this polarization. So as we know from the classical theories on populism, so it has a binary logic which divides the society between good versus evil, friends versus enemies, us versus them, and especially the people, the real people, the native people versus the others. So the others also it's a very large context. So it might be the immigrants, it might be related with the terrorism, which is the case in Turkey. I'm going to refer to some concrete rhetoric. So the existing cultural conflict in Turkey, which may be defined as a Kulturkampf, is very reductionist, is very Manichaean kind of populism. So it's very reductionist, I may say. So which is dividing the society in two big poles. Even we have more than two poles in society, but with this populist rhetoric, we are dividing the society. So first theoretical background is populism, of course, and the second one is communication. I don't know how to spell in English because it's a very French notion developed by Volton, communication. So it's different than communication, it's different than incommunication, but with communication, he wants to tell Volton that a communication leaves no room for coexistence, mutual comprehension. So it promotes more and more the conflicts and it's very alienating, demonizing, and presenting the opposition. Of course, it might be the migration, the terrorist, the political opposition. So it includes different subjects. So it creates and it presents the other as an incomprehensible other, which is widening more and more the polarization. That's why I think very important to use all these together in order to understand and analyze the polarization. Turkey, so we can use different names, and we use Turkey nowadays, so that's why I'm using Turkey. But Turkey had lots of elections during the past few years. So we had recently this presidential election. There was a real context here, because first, it was our first experience to have a second round since the transition to the presidential system in 2018. So it was our first experience to have this second round. So it is an important context. So the second one, it was we hit by a huge earthquake. So there was the consequences of the earthquake, especially in the eastern part of Turkey. Of course, the western part and eastern parts have different realities, and it hit by different consequences. So the third point is of course, economic crisis, a very high inflation rate that all influenced the electoral process. When I said electoral process, I am talking about political discourses that all widened and developed the polarization, especially during election times. So I put here some examples of speech, but as you will see, the polarization through populism, it's very high. It's a bit difficult to do the translation, of course, but I tried to do my best. But in the political communication and in the political discourse, we saw economic crisis, nationalism, migration, national security as different topic, as integrated to the political discourse, and reinforced more and more the populism, polarization, and communication, and push people and push the politicians as well through a conflict, in order not to understand each other, not to compromise, not to negotiate, but to conflict, to this polarization as well. So it's a brief explanation of what is going on now and during the election times. But my point, as I mentioned before, so is to understand the youth. Where is youth in this polarized structure? So I conducted a small research. It's a preliminary research that I want to develop as well. So I want to understand how are and what are the continuities and discontinuities of youth, how they relate to politics, what is their relationship with politics, how they participate, how they use social media, what is the effect of social media. I wanted to understand this, and I want to relate with all this polarization and communication. So I find it important to understand the youth population in every country. I think it's important. Their areas of participation, their representation. It's important in order to understand this intergenerational fairness. I think it's an important topic as well. So I want to share very briefly my data, one part of my data, of course. So I had a small book on that. If you are interested, you can check it. So when I talk about continuities and discontinuities, I'm referring to voting, firstly, and voting behavior. Secondly, the use of social media, and third, their relation with political communication tools during election times. So we can see on voting a very clear continuities because in Turkey we participate through voting. and one and only participation type, I may say. So we are not participating to rallies, we are not participating to manifestation, we are not on the street. So we vote regularly, and the turnout is very high, around 87% in Turkey. So young people also vote like their parents, so they participate through vote. It is a continuity. However, they are not fully continue their families' ideologies or political behaviors, so they are separating from them a little bit, and they insist that they decide themselves. So it is also a discontinuity. So they are not influenced directly and fully by their friends, by their family, but there's an influence of social media as well. We can see it's clear, but they want to decide themselves. So this is a discontinuity that I can tell. The use of social media, of course, in every society, youth and young people use very frequently, but in Turkey we have very high rates of internet in households, also internet use, social media use, as you may see from the tables as well. So they use digital media, social networks to express ideas, participate to politics. So they use mostly Twitter, YouTube, news websites as a source of information. The only continuity we can see is the television. So they use television as a conventional, if we can say that it's a conventional media. So they use television as well as an information, as a source of information. So it is important. So they have a very close relationship with all these social media and digital tools. When we look at what influence during election times as the political communication tools, so again, we may see as the very high average of social media, like you can see on the table with 5.39, the average point of social media. So in terms of political communication, they prefer YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, which is X now, but I'm always saying Twitter, so okay, X. They use these tools have decisive impact, have a prominent role on their voting, on their voting behavior. But at least like half of them they declared that they don't change their opinion. It's their own choice, or they are very determined as well. So what we can if I have to sum up, so they participate, they are interested. So when we asked how much you are interested, the rates are very high. But what is the quality of this interest? What is the political knowledge? So these are my concern and my questions. So these are very difficult topics to measure as well. And with quantitative research, it's more difficult. I think more qualitative research must be done in order to understand this quality of interest, this quality of political knowledge. And also there are positive sides and also negative sides of use of social media that are discussed frequently in the literature as well. So it's good. It's a positive role on construction of diversity, political expression, developing political knowledge, and it gives some liberty, of course, social media. But Twitter is a very reactionary space in Turkey. So are these young people, through my research, I see that they are following the tweets, they are reading the tweets, but I see that they are just passive communicators. So they are not active, they are not reactive. So this is the negative side also. And also another negative side of the social media is it grows populism, it grows again the polarization. So it's a very big dichotomy, like diversity or polarization. So it blocked the local participation of youth and young generation. They are really inactive youth in Turkey on local democracy process because of centralized decision-making process, but because also because of polarization. So they are like passive communicators. In my opinion, but we have to work on that. So we have to develop future politics in order to engage more and more young people into politics. So we can not only accept the turnout and participation through vote. Further research will help to understand, and I think further qualitative research we have to do in order to understand how youth see the polarization in Turkey, how they understand or how they are affected by this communication. So the impossibility to comprehend each other. And also we have to understand youth as not a monolithic block. So we have to use in plural. So there are different youth categories in the rural side, in urban side, in eastern and western have different characteristics. So as a social fraction, it's not a block, monolithic block, but it exists in different forms. That's why I think on doing new qualitative research in order to understand these reactions of young people. So my final question is, will it lead this situation of polarization and communication sourced with populism, of course? This will lead a form of hyper-democracy, which means a greater participation and a greater engagement among youth, or it will result in hypodemocracy. These are the notions used by Anne Yüksel, and again, French political scientist. It will lead to apathy, to anger, to disengagements. So we will see during the next elections, perhaps, or if we will be able to develop a new research before the elections, perhaps we can understand more deeply the situation of youth in Turkey. So yeah, I'm finishing with these questions. Thank you. I hope I'm in time. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm open to questions, and thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. You're listening to me. Thank you very much, Isil. So I will introduce now. Cassie Esuarapa. Cassie, are you there?
Yes, yes. Hi, hello, good evening.
Okay. Hi.
Yes, yes. I
Great.
just thank you very much.
If you're there, you can share your
Yes.
PowerPoint now.
I'm sharing. Yes, yes.
It's okay, and I will just say that Cassie Esuarapa, we thank you. Yeah, it's great.
Yes.
Yeah, great. So Cassie Esuarapa, he's an assistant professor at the Department of Tribal Studies, Art, Culture, and Folk Literature at the Faculty of Tribal Studies in Indira Gandhi National Tribal University in India. So his presentation, well, you can see the title. So the floor is yours, Cassie. You have 15 minutes.
Yes. Thank you. Because there is some technical issue, that's why I'm not showing my video. And thank you very much for the Committee of Political Sociology, especially Lucia, Maricel, and Stephanie, and all others, and for giving me an opportunity to participate in this workshop on polarization, broadly speaking. and the increase of discourse polarization. For this, I choose a topic related to my own state, Andhra Pradesh, and I'm venturing into bit political science. Kindly excuse me, because basically I'm an anthropologist. So I'm trying to see how polarization in especially India and especially my state. So my presentation is like polarization of underprivileged classes in Indian electoral system in the state of Andhra Pradesh as a case study. So here I want to discuss because this presentation mainly focuses on complex phenomena of these underprivileged sections or backward classes, what we call in India, in their role, and then especially polarization of them in the Indian elections, examining its historical roots and also political implications. And also my presentation dwells into the historical context of the caste system and the emergence of backward classes as a political force and their voting pattern, and especially the impact of the reservation policies, or what we call affirmative action policies outside India. So when we come to historical context, you see and when I said caste system and how it has its impact on Indian politics, because I divided this into three stages or phases. Like in ancient origin, it has ancient origin. For example, caste system, which is a hierarchical social structure, which has existed in India for centuries, and which is shaping the social relations, societal relations, and influencing the political dynamics. And later during the British period, we know, as you all know, because India was under colonial rule for almost 100 plus years, more than under British rule. So they reinforced the caste system, and especially they introduced the concepts of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, and which has further, increased the state of the marginal status of these groups. And after we got independence, post-independence era, when we had our own constitution abolished this caste system and especially untouchability, and implemented the reservation policies in order to promote social justice and also empower the backward classes of India. So how emergence of backward classes as a political force created a process of polarization, and that also I thought four phases again here, like growing awareness, like BCs have increasingly become aware of their historical social disadvantages and leading to a demand for representation and political empowerment. And then second factor, political mobilization. Political parties have tried to actively seek to mobilize to these BC voters and recognize them as a potential force, to influence the election outcomes. And the third factor is rise of leaders. Several prominent backward class leaders have emerged, and they try to advocate the rights of their communities, interests, and also influencing the political discourse across India. With this, I say across India, we find a lot of these BC leaders. For example, Uttar Pradesh is one of the biggest state, and Bihar, and we have like Samajwadi Party, and then Rashtriya Janata Dal, and these people headed by the BC prominent leaders who are very famous leaders actually. And formation of parties, some BC leaders also have formed their own parties and political parties, especially as I said, Samajwadi Party and Rashtriya Janata Dal in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. And these forces, they try to address specific concerns of their communities, and how rule of reservations try to these policies or affirmative action policies helped backward classes in order to come up, in the political process. And as affirmative action policy, these reservation policies have tried to help to form a affirmative action which aim to increase representation of backward classes in education, employment, and government. So, otherwise, it is unimaginable for them to come up in the society, and especially in the employment and entering into the government sector. So this rule of reservation really helping them to come up in their social ladder. Second, social mobility. Reservation policies have contributed to increased social mobility among backward classes, providing opportunities for education and employment. When it comes to social mobility, there are a lot of studies, like especially sociologists like M.N. Srinivas and others from India, Indian sociologists and anthropologists. They contributed immensely, and especially M.N. Srinivas proposed the concept of Sanskritization, where the Sanskritization, lower caste, what he means to Sanskritization, lower caste communities, especially backward classes, they try to imitate the activities of the upper caste in order to come up in the social life, especially performances, rituals, social functions, like that. And then, of course, there are some controversies also regarding the reservations, because everyone feel that, as there is something, because when you are giving reservation, so it is at the cost of the merit. So there were a lot of concerns, and especially, and as we all know, when OBC reservation introduced after the recommendation of the Mandal Commission report, all over India, there were a lot of, demonstrations, especially Mandal politics. Opposition groups, especially, who majority of them upper caste, they opposed the OBC reservations. Same communities, when the present NDA government came, so same communities, because majority of them general caste, and then they are already in the higher echelons of society, they are ready to get 10% of the quota from the present government. So then influence of this BC leaders action outcomes. So here also I again 4 points I framed, like a charismatic leadership. A charisma is playing an important role for this and community representation and political alliances. Political alliances and electoral gains. So when it's coming to charismatic leadership, basic leaders often oppose the charisma and strong oratory skills. Just a minute, because this is something, yeah. So yeah, so they try to possess charisma and strong oratory skills, connecting with voters and mobilizing the support of the people, and it is really helping, because a lot of leaders, charismatic leaders, for example, we say that in India, late Indira Gandhi, and then Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and these are the people who are charismatic leaders. Even now, people remember them, and they pull people like anything. And same way, the community representation, and because their presence in politics, political arena, definitely provides a voice for their BC backward classes, their concerns, and further addresses the issues of inequality and discrimination. So community representation also helps these people to come up, and also that will result in election outcomes. And political alliances, basic leaders have formed political alliances, influencing the formation of the governments and also shaping the policy decisions. These parties, as I was mentioning earlier, UP and Bihar, these parties on their own, rarely they come to power, because their population is and vote share is also not up to the mark. Hence, they were forming an alliance politics, especially alliances with the major parties like Bharatiya Janata Party or Indian National Congress, and then they try to form the governments. And the last point, electoral gains, their popularity and support have led to significant electoral gains for their parties, and which is impacting the balance of powers and in elections. Now, what is the challenges some of the challenges faced by these backward classes in political sphere? Here also I have couple of points. Limited access to resources, and because, as I was mentioning, since they are backward classes, their access to quality education, healthcare, and economic opportunities, and all these factors are hindering, their participation in the politics. And political patronage, and patronage is very much important, unless and until somebody supports them wholeheartedly, it is very difficult to come up. That is another factor to increase their representation, and which leads to their empowerment. And lack of political awareness, limited political awareness and understanding can make it difficult for basic communities to engage in informed political decision making. And then last point, internal divisions, because within the community can weaken their collective political power, hinder their ability to achieve shared goals. Here, these divisions also created by the major parties, because these major parties, whom they don't want these regional parties to come up and share the power with them. So that is also another factor where they have their internal divisions among these parties are keep on increasing, and which led to their collapsing their government. And then representation of these parties in the governance. So their increased representation because of the reservation policies have led to increased representation, and especially in the legislature, both parliament and local state legislatures, and also government bodies, and also promoting, which all these things try to promote their inclusivity. So emerging leaders is another point where I found interesting, because more BC individuals are assuming leadership roles in government, contributing to political decisions and influencing the governance. And policy changes is another factor. Policies are being implemented to address the specific needs and challenges faced by BCs in order to promote their social justice and equity. And finally, community empowerment. BC communities are becoming more empowered through their participation in governance and fostering collective action and development. These are the factors how BCs are able to represent in the governance. And impact of polarization on the Indian electoral system. So here I thought of some couple of points. Regionalism and identity politics. This polarization has led to the rise of regional parties and identity-based politics, fragmenting the political landscape. Because, as I said, a lot of regional parties have come up in India post, especially after the LPG liberalization, privatization, and globalization. But otherwise, earlier only one party, single party or two-party systems were there. But later, now because of this polarization, a lot of regional politics regional parties have come, and also identity politics also became very prominent, especially post 2000, and that also a very important factor to understand. And then another factor is the social unrest and political instability. The polarization of political discourse and social divisions can contribute to unrest, instability, and decline in democratic values. Because this is leading to political instability, because regional parties, because they have their own agenda and they don't have any national agenda. That is one reason precisely. Because they have, for example, in our own state, when I talk about Andhra Pradesh, I will tell, because provincial governments worried about their own issues than the national issues. That time, because when we have issues with international relations with the bordering countries, naturally there are issues and which affect the security, social unrest, and also political instability. And then electoral volatility and uncertainty is another factor, another important factor of polarization. Polarization led to electoral volatility and making it difficult for the election outcomes, and also fostering uncertainty. So real issues, because with all these, what is happening, I found real issues of the people are diverted with polarization. Because, for example, if you see in the current government, especially after 2014 to now, because real issues are completely diverted, and always they are playing politics with the name of Hindutva, religion, God and goddesses. Because of that, last 10 years, there is a lot of large scale unemployment. Unemployment has increased, lot of issues. So only thing, unrest is not come up openly. So because of the polarization, real issues of the people, especially the employment, social security, all these things are really not able to address properly. This is the another point. And then when it is coming to Andhra Pradesh, when my own state, it is one of the province or the state in South India. So it has almost a population of 9.52 crores, and I have given male and female ratio. Polarization resulted because, as I was saying, emergence of the one of the regional party known as Telugu Desam Party in electoral politics, and this party came in order to counter the continuous power of the Congress, actually, Indian National Congress. So, and this party came into existence with the notion of supporting backward classes by its founder, is famous film actor and NTR. And later, this party has taken over by his son-in-law, Chandrababu Naidu. So during the initial years of its power, numerous BC leaders have emerged as leaders, in Andhra Pradesh. So later, it gave rise to identity politics in the name of divisions within the subcastes of scheduled caste, especially because in order to emerge his own force, Chandrababu Naidu created, this rift between the scheduled caste, because in the scheduled caste in Andhra Pradesh, we have two groups within scheduled caste. So there, and he created rift between Mala and Madiga. So Madigas are they started owning Telugu parties, and Mala community are started owning to Congress party, that is Indian National Congress. So then later, during the current regime of NDA at the center also, polarization helped to create social divisions among Hindus, and by the name of religion, and especially by BJP and TDP, and now Janasena, but another film actor has entered in Andhra politics. So now all of them formed now their government formed recently after 2024 elections in Andhra Pradesh. These BC leaders started shifting into some attracted to this. Later, another phenomena what I could notice, these backward class leaders have started shifting towards right-wing ideology due to their caste or jati politics or Hindutva politics, in order to because these people keep on raising about their gods and goddesses. So naturally these things became as a symbols, or identity markers for these local BC leaders. This has further led to electoral volatility, where people are divided into caste and jati lines, actually. This shift in a way sidelined or diverted the real issues of the people or masses, such as because from all these issues diverted, especially from the real issues, like basic amenities are not there, unemployment is increasing, poverty, there is a lot of poverty, lack of education, and health infrastructure. So, in order to conclude, because how to address this, addressing inequality and fostering inclusive democracy, it requires addressing the historical and social factors which contributing to backward class polarization. This includes promoting economic empowerment and ensuring quality education, strengthening social safety nets. And by promoting social justice and equal opportunities, Indian can create a more equitable and harmonious society. That end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your patient listening. I welcome your questions as Maricel said in the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cassie. If you can, yeah. Thank you very much, Cassie, for your presentation. So now I propose I introduce Rocío Anunciata, who is here. Hi, Rocío. Hola. Rocío Anunciata.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. How are you?
Bye.
She's professor of political science at the Universidad de San Martín in Argentina, and independent researcher of the National Council of Scientific and Technical Research, so the CONICET in Argentina. Rocío will share also PowerPoint, and she will talk about polarization in Argentina in the case of Milei government. So, well, the floor is yours, Rocío. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I am very grateful for this invitation to participate in this great workshop. I am not sure if I will talk exactly about polarization, but it's near. So my presentation will address an ongoing research project that incorporates elements for two work in progress. On one hand, a significant portion comes from some focus group that I conducted in October 2023 with Milei's voters, while the other part stems from very preliminary studies, not really studies, is more like a research agenda about the president's use of social media, especially X or Twitter. The general argument posits that Milei's voters did not have a defined radical right-wing ideology in common, which implies that we should be cautious in interpreting his electoral victory as a shift of the electorate to the right, like a right turn. But however, the radicalization and so the increase in polarization is amplified and fostered from the position of power, from the presidency. The analysis of the case like Milei's could guide us in two directions. One more sociological interpretation emerged from various ongoing and recent studies about Milei as seen as an outcome of changes in the electorate, particularly appealing to young men and informal workers who did not benefit from state assistance, for example. And it also seemed to be a case close to that of Bolsonaro in Brazil, which was interpreted as the result of the mobilization of different conservative sectors that began during the protest of June 2013, bringing together different groups like neoliberals, neoconservative, evangelicals, and others. But we can also have this more political interpretation because academic specialists in the new rights in the Latin American region showed that the increase in right-wing electoral offer in different countries was not accompanied by a significant ideological change in public opinion. Rather, it was more like a response to dissatisfaction with the previous government's performance, and so it not imply a right turn in the electorate. And some authors also have recently emphasized the weight of negative identities, that voters react expressing their rejection to a specific party rather than supporting the proposal of a candidate. So our hypothesis was most following these readings, the political interpretation, and suggesting that among Milei's voters, we would find a consensus around the anti-political dimension of his discourse, meaning the rejection of the caste, the political class, but not necessary in the economic, redistributive, or cultural dimensions. Between October 9 and 12, 2023, we conducted 10 focus group with voters of Javier Milei, with people that have voted for him in the pasado elections. That means the obligatory, mandatory primary elections that we have in Argentina. The advantage of conducting focus group for this exploratory research were twofold. On one hand, to gather new information about a problem that has not yet been very much studied, with openness to unexpected ideas or unexpected interpretations. And on the other hand, to understand how opinions are formed and how individuals react to the comment of others, especially since the aim was to observe the effect of the political and correct ideas that Milei spread in his speech. So I want to be quick, and I will show you some quoting, some citations that I think are representative of the different consensus and the discussions in the focus group. Among the participants, there were a clear consensus around shared feelings of uncertainty and fear and anger, as well as a whispered agreement with Milei's discourse against the political class or the caste. Here we have more examples. As we mentioned, here I think this, we observe a consensus around the rejection of the two main coalitions in the country and the political class in general, along with the preference for voting for someone who never governed. That was the most the idea that was most supported by the different participants. In this sense, the discourse that resonated the most with Milei's voter was related to the so-called change show plan, el plan Motosierra, that supposed cutting in public spending. The participants seemed to agree and reinforce each other's view when it came to attacking the political class, echoing, sorry for my pronunciation, the tone of revenge present in Milei's own discourse about the caste, la casta. The participants in the focus group embraced the idea that cutting state spending mean cutting the privilege of the politicians. An element that emerged in the focus group was the appreciation of Milei's personal attributes and the recognition of his leadership. There were not consensus regarding his political incorrect and vulgar way of speaking and acting. For some people, some participants, that is a problem. And for others is a virtue. But however, there was an agreement around the idea of Milei as a frank and sincere person. Participants highlighted and value the notion that Milei is someone that who tells the truth, even if it's a painful truth. So they value the characteristics of the personal attribute that distinguish him precisely from professional politicians, like in the image of professional politicians, like spontaneity, sincerity, and proximity. Like for example, not having the necessity of moving in the street with security, or like the possibility of being dancing around the people without a concern of the security. But when we turn to the economic problems, we saw that Millet's discourse on the role of the state does not generate the same level of consensus as his anti-political rhetoric. Participants were disappointed by the state inefficiency, but they don't believe that its regulatory role in social activities should be eliminated. They value public health, public education, and consider that resorting to this service in the market is a suboptimal situation. Like, they value a state with social functions, but they are disappointed with an inefficient state. And one of the unexpected elements that the focus group revealed was a particular interpretation that Millet's voter had of the educational voucher proposal. It was a proposal made during the campaign. The voucher, for example, is interpreted as a measure to expand rights within the framework of a demand for a greater equity. They want more equity, for example, in the access for public goods, for public service, because they feel that who use public goods are in a disadvantaged position compared to those who access private goods. Participants understood that the voucher would function as a personal subsidy assistance, allowing the beneficiary to choose, for example, which institution to study, a public one or a private one, and to pay for educational institutions that would otherwise be inaccessible to them. And perhaps another unexpected finding is that Millet electorate that does use and depend on public service. They are not people that are away from the public services, but they depend on it. But however, there is also a resentment towards what they perceive as we can call small injustice, such as individuals receiving social assistance without working, for example, or those receiving pensions without having made contributions to the state in the past. This allows us to hypothesize that Millet's voters do uphold an idea of merit based on individual effort, without recognizing how this may contradict the notion of equity that they also defend. The conservative cultural agenda did not find either an unanimous support among the focus group participants. In each group, there was a minority that embraced and reproduce a right-wing discourse in these acts, such as, for example, opposing rights related to diversity or gender, but a majority in every group that appear to hold stronger progressive values. In general, there was a consensus on supporting the right to abortion, for example, and the general sexual education in schools, known as the ESI in Argentina, and rejecting the unrestricted carrying of firearms. But however, there were also a consensus around a punitive spirit, a punitive discourse. Many focus group participants recount incidents of insecurity that they have suffered and show a position in favor of self-defense in case of criminal attacks. In some groups, in some groups, the discourse around conservative values was more prominent, particularly in the Mendoza group. It's a province in Argentina, which was the only one where someone defend the last dictatorship and support the theory that it was a civil war. But at the same time, in another group, for example, there was a participant who had related disappear in the last dictatorship. So preliminary conclusions of this part. At this point in the research, the preliminary conclusion was that the group of pure Milei voters and supporters prior the presidential victory was more receptive to his anti-political discourse than to his economic libertarian or cultural right-wing discourse. It's important to clarify that this research concerns Milei pure voters who are different from Milei's voters in the runoff election because they were mixed with voters from Juntos por el Cambio, another coalition in Argentina, among whom they may be more ideological driven, pro-market and conservative voters. And the pure voters of Milei are also different from the activists and the militants, like the active supporters, who were often young men and very skilled in social media campaigns and hold positions that continuously polarize against progressivism, such as, for example, the cultural battle against the gender ideology. So the contribution of this research is to show that the polarization which assumes an alignment of positions on different issues as it is presented in contexts where radical right populisms emerge, does not necessarily originate from society, but instead is fostered from positions of power. And while it is evident that radical right populisms articulate very heterogeneous and contradictory positions among themselves, represented by groups of actors that constitute the coalition. In the case of Milei, for example, the anti-abortion groups and the neoliberal groups. The perspective of the pure voters that we incorporate through this research allows to better understand the predominance of negativity and the fragility of the constructed ties. These preliminary conclusions led to the second part of the research, which for now is merely an agenda because I have not been able to begin a systematic survey about that. But the hypothesis that I want to share with you for the discussion is that the polarization is promoted from above, especially through Javier Milei's use of Twitter or X since he assumed the presidency. So the study I conducted during the campaign on Milei's social media revealed that he received support from Twitter users, influencers, and streamers and trolls who amplified his discourse through accounts like, for example, El Peluca Milei on X, or channels from YouTube like for streaming like Breakpoint. Even though his personal account did not post as much content. So he posts not so much publications, but other accounts that we call satellite accounts or profiles amplify his speech. This changed when he became president, and his activity on X or Twitter increased significantly, reaching up to 300 tweets per day, with likes and retweets from many accounts that spread fake news and amplified hate speech. So he began to repost and like discourse that promotes polarization, promotes the different views of especially affective polarization. His most extreme content typically consists of retweets from trolls and influencers accounts, which increase their visibility thanks to the presidential support, and so reinforce a community, but at the same time expands, spread the discourse because the algorithm rewards the interactions of these accounts. So he reached also the people that are not in the same community of active supporters of Milei. He reached the more independent citizen because the algorithms hours the number of interaction of these accounts. So ultimately, this is still, I have here some examples. They are not the best, maybe, but the general idea is that the growing affective polarization in Argentina is being promoted from above in a coordinated manner, in a coordinated strategy, as a presidential strategy, and as a part of a populist discourse. So the role of the leader and the speech of the leader is very important to create the affective polarization. Well, this is the part of the research that I need to continue. But you can see Milei repost frequently sexist discourse, for example, or here, for example, hate speech, and like here, for example, fake news, sexist speech, hate speech, and this is from above. So I will stop here, and I I look forward the comments, because this is an ongoing research. The comments and critics are very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rocio, for this interesting presentation. So now, for people who are connected online, you can use the chat. You can put the questions on the chat, and we will be managing that. So now I'm glad to introduce the last presentation of this first panel. And so is Sophie Enosa Attali, who will be presenting his paper. So Sophie Enosa Attali, she's a professor here of political science, maître de conférence à l'Institut catholique de Paris. And she's the head of the political science department of the Institut catholique de Paris at the Faculty of Social Science, Economics and Law. And Sophie Enos will present her work on polarization in the cases of Finland and Sweden. So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Sophie.
Merci à toi, Maricel. Hi to everyone. Before presenting my paper, it is necessary for me to explain what it may look a little bit maybe out of place, both in terms of its subject and its approach, because as a matter of fact, I'm not a specialist in political sociology, but rather in international relations. I work especially on security issues. Nevertheless, my work on my research subject has led me recently to make some observations regarding the rise of polarization. And this is what I explained in a seminar that took place some months ago. And so this is what I let Maricel, whom I thank very deeply, to invite me to take part to this workshop. To introduce my paper, it is necessary for me to tell you more about my research subject. I've been working for several years on security issues in Northern Europe, more specifically on the evolution of the security policies of Finland and Sweden in a context of rising tensions with Russia since its invasion of Crimea in 2014. So as you can see, polarization is far from being the main issue I work on. But nevertheless, since I've been studying these two countries, I've noticed the rise of far-right parties in both of them, a trend which is particularly strong since less than 10 years now. This represents a major shift in the political life of these two countries, which are usually known for their culture of consensus, their culture of moderation. Swedish and Finnish political life now seems to be much more polarized. Considering that this change is taking place in the framework of the war in Ukraine, it may be interesting to question the possible relationship that may exist between this growing polarization in Finland and Sweden and the context of the war in Ukraine. With having in mind the fact that Sweden and Finland are, especially Finland, are at the vicinity of Russia. And so this plays, of course, a role. Considering, as Gorevich put it 40 years ago, I think, or almost, considering that international relations and domestic politics are so interrelated that they should be analyzed simultaneously as a whole. My research question today is the following one. What does the coincidence between the growing polarization and the context of war teach us about polarization? To what extent does the proximity to an interstate battlefield and the sense of insecurity that this generates promote political polarization? So to begin with, sorry, I can't find anymore. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, to begin, so to begin, let's evaluate the degree of polarization. in Finland and Sweden. To do that, I rely on a polarization index created by Russell Dalton that measures the dispersion of national parties. As you can see, this index here is used to, is considered along two dimensions, an economic one and a cultural one, and takes into consideration as well the size of each party. The index goes from 0 to 10. 0 indicates that all parties converge around the center, and 10 that polarization is very high because parties are then located at opposite ends. When we look at the data aggregated by Dalton and Burning in a recent paper, what is striking is that Finland is among the countries where polarization increased the most between 2006 and 2019, both regarding economic issues and cultural issues. If polarization did not increase so much in Sweden regarding the economic dimension, Finland and Sweden are respectively the second and third countries in this list of countries where polarization has increased the most in terms of the cultural dimension since 2006. But besides the data, what evidence is there of growing polarization in Finland and Sweden? So now let's have a look. Sorry, yeah. All right. Let's first have a look at the changes that have affected the Swedish and the Finnish party systems since the beginning of the 2000s. So let's begin with the case of Sweden. Traditional Swedish party systems consist in 5 parties, 2 on the left and 3 on the right. But from World War II until the beginning of the 1990s, the Social Democrats dominated the political agenda. And then the party system from 2006 till 2019, the party system was 2-block structure. On the one hand, there was a Social Democratic Party, and on the other hand, there was a center-right alliance called the Alliance for Sweden. And then the arrival of a new party, the Sweden Democrats, changes model, the SD, Sweden Democrats, forming a 3rd bloc. And the Sweden Democrats, so let me tell you a little bit about this party. The Sweden Democrats is a party which was founded in 1988 by a previously active member of the neo-Nazi Nordic Reich Party. The SD had their first locally elected representatives in 1991, and they entered in parliament in 2010, but with only 5.7% of the vote. But then they doubled their vote in 2014, and in September 22, they arrived in 2nd place at the national election, as you can see beneath, with 20.7% of the vote. So now they are not in the government, but they were able to impose a condition on the parties that formed the government coalition, because the government coalition is dependent on their support at the parliament. So they play a big role now, political role. Now let's move to Finland. So Finland has a multi-party system with no one party having majority control for long. So it has a long tradition of coalition governments, mainly centrist or social democratic. As illustrated by the graph on your left, yes, the Finnish party system has traditionally been extremely stable, with 3 large parties typically dividing some 65% of the votes between them, and the rest going to the 2 medium-sized parties, and then 3 smaller size. But this tradition was broken with the rise of the Finns party. So let me tell you a little bit about this, the Finns party. So the Finns party was originally born from a separation inside the Center Party in 1959. Under the name Finnish Rural Party, it had received 10% of the votes in the 1970 elections, but then it declined steadily and filed bankruptcy. And former members of the Rural Party founded the True Finns Party, also known now as the Finns Party. So it has 2 names, but nowadays it's more usually designed as Finn's party. So so in 2011, the party gained 19% of the vote and obtained 39 seats in parliament, which is a lot compared to the 5 it had previously. And it then became the third political force. In 2015, they arrived in second position and entered the coalition government. They remained, since then, they have remained at the second place. And now, at the last election in April 2023, they obtained 46 seats, which is only 2 less than the first party, which obtained 48. So it's a very high, which is the Social Democratic Party, National Coalition Party, a center-right party. And I have to add that the female leader of the party gains the largest individual vote of any candidate nationally. So it's a really, really good result. So we can see that both in Sweden and Finland, 2 parties that were not at the center of the national political life before began to gain popularity in the 2010s, and thus transformed the party system in both cases. So we can, and considering that, so this party, appear as a new party challenger on the right, and they, as we're going to see, they differentiate mostly themselves from other parties on cultural issues. So that's now what we're trying to see. So which polarization can we observe in the renewed Finnish and Swedish party system? So here you can see the webpage of the Sweden Democrat parties. So the webpage, the English webpage. So as you can see, when we go on to this, the first thing, I think this is maybe the best summary of their position: vote for a better Sweden. That less implicitly means that the country would be in decline, and that it would need to get back on its feet. The image also is interesting because you see there is a flag, the Swedish flag, and also a wooden house, which is of course typical of Sweden. The main themes of their program are, there are 4 main themes. 2 have to do with economic issues, and the 2 other one deal with social issues, namely immigration and security. The mottos are: we want a serious migration policy, and we want a safe society. Besides, the Sweden Democrats have specific position on issues such as gender and environment. For example, the party is opposed to gender quotas and emphasizes the nuclear family as the best family model. And regarding environmental issues, it tends to prioritize Swedish interests over climate measures. And they criticize emphasis put by the red greens, they call them the red greens on wind power, for example. And they have a very good opinion on nuclear power, which is very different from the majority of Swedish parties. Let's now move to Finland. The image also is, as you can see, is very representative of Finland, lake, the snow, the wood, which is very important in the national economy. And the motto is very interesting: vote Finland back. And also the explanation, if they say it is to defend, I think you can read here, it is to defend and promote the interests of Finland and the Finnish citizens. On its webpage, the party presents itself as, quotation, a patriotic and Christian social party that promotes national interests. beyond helping disadvantaged, agreed, and marginalized Finns, quotation, the party explains its politics are based, quotation, sorry, on Finnish history and Finnish culture. And another and last quotation, Finnishness is felt in the heart. It will remain there despite the change of the world. So there is a focus, of course, on national identity and also a focus against immigration. As in Sweden, the Finns party, considering its good result, obtained concessions from the other parties of the government coalition regarding immigration and integration, which are the main themes of their program. So in the light of this development, we can affirm the existence in Finland and Sweden of a growing polarization, which is not primarily based on economic issues, but mainly on the focus of both parties on immigration, the defense of national identity. And in the case of Sweden, I'm going to tell you more about it in a few minutes, on security issues, especially the high rate of crime in the country, because Sweden is one of the European countries with the highest rate of crime. And also regarding Sweden, the Sweden Democrats, there was also a focus on questions regarding education. So this is the general political landscape right now. So now let's now question the possible link between this growing polarization and the context of the war in Ukraine. So it's not easy to establish a link between an international conflict and national polarization. And of course, the Finnish and Swedish cases are no exception to this difficulty. At first glance, the war in Ukraine and its early stages are far from being a source of polarization. On the contrary, as it is often the case when a country's security is threatened, the war in Ukraine seems to have given rise to a unanimous movement in Finland and Sweden. As Summer wrote it already in 1906, the exigencies of war with outsiders are what make peace inside. And yes, it is often observed that external threats tend to heighten national identity, and periods in which external threats are low are associated with more partisan conflict. But and this is what we observe in Finland and Sweden, because regarding the decision they took after the beginning of the tensions between Russia and Ukraine, and of course the decision to be candidate to NATO after the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, these decisions were taken without much debate at the domestic level. So apparently, far from generating polarization, the war in Ukraine has fostered political unity in both Finland and Sweden regarding foreign affairs. Nevertheless, if we look at the graph representing the evolution of polarization in Finland and Sweden, something is striking. In both countries, the increase in polarization occurred around 2014. And 2014 is not just any year. 2014 is the year when Russia invaded Crimea. And as early as 2013, both Finland and Sweden began to be intimidated by Russia. So the increase in polarization coincides on a temporal point of view with a moment when Russia began to display its aggressive stance towards Ukraine, and with a moment when Russia began to intimidate Finland and Sweden. So that's the reason why I question the correlation between the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and the polarization of Finland and Sweden. So to see if there is a connection, I suggest we first have a look to the perceived consequences of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict for Finland and Sweden, and its possible impact on the votes. Before 2013, Finland and Sweden traditionally felt protected by their security posture, namely their non-alliance. This was especially true for Sweden, which chose to associate its 200-year-old tradition of neutrality with peace. However, as Russia has become less predictable, the environment has been perceived as increasingly threatening by Finland and Sweden. So I have to give maybe some details. Since March 2013, Russia has been conducting large-scale military exercises not far from Sweden and Finland. It began to make incursions into the sea and airspace of the two countries. Tactical missiles were deployed by Moscow, not far from the Swedish island of Gotland. And Finland observed a Russian military presence on the Kola Peninsula, which is also Sweden. And of course, in Finland, these events reactivated traumatic memories, namely the Winter War and the Continuation War. And beyond this reactivation of past anxieties, the Russian actions carried out close to Finnish territories disrupted Finns and Swedes' sense of security. They generated uncertainty and became the focus of collective fear. And this fear manifested itself more clearly when Russia launched its attack on Ukraine in February 2022. And as you may see in Finland, there is, compared to other European Union countries, there is a high fear that the war in Ukraine could spread to more countries in Europe and especially in Finland. And this is a little bit like the case for the Swedes seem to have less fear regarding their own country, but the fear that the war could spread in Europe is very high compared to the European Union results. And as shown by different studies, fear is often related to radicalization, since insecurity encourages people to search for stability in finding scapegoats and thus developing extreme attitudes. It seems that when people are fearful, party identification and ideology play a lesser role in their vote. Fearful voters tend to place more weight on specific issues. And in that sense, the war in Ukraine may have fostered polarization in Finland as well as in Sweden. Let's switch now to the economic impact of the war in Ukraine. So the feeling of fear was reinforced by the impact of the war in Ukraine on the economy. As we can see on the graphs, all in all, more Finns and Swedes than the average Europeans so their countries their country's economic situation will deteriorate, especially the Swedes, who have become much more pessimistic than the other Europeans. Sorry. And hence, the war in Ukraine has had an impact on Finland's and Sweden's economy, especially in terms of inflation. And the economic consequences of the war are particularly high in Finland, since the country is much more dependent on trade with Russia. This economic anxiety may favor a vote for the Finns party and the Sweden Democrats, since these two parties receive most of their votes from people with low income, as you can see here for the Finns party, and now for the Sweden Democrats. Nevertheless, it's not possible with the data used here to show a link between the economic impact of the war in Ukraine and a higher vote for the two far-right parties. So now, in order to test the hypothesis of a possible link between the war in Ukraine and polarization in Finland and Sweden, I am going to take into account recent events
I'm sorry, here somebody has micro open, maybe? No.
Well, okay, I go.
Yeah,
I go on.
yeah,
Okay.
you can maybe.
So, so to test a possible effect of the war in Ukraine, so I suggest to take. I'm going to take into account indirect consequences of Finnish and Swedish. Consequences of the war in Ukraine on Finnish and Swedish homeland security. Since the last national elections, Finland and Sweden have suffered indirect consequences of the war in Ukraine. And I'm going to focus on two indirect impacts. In Finland, one major indirect impact of the war has to do with immigration. The question here is not about refugees coming from Ukraine. There are about 44,000 Ukrainian beneficiaries of temporary protection in Finland. And according to a recent study, their integration is quite good. And the arrival of refugees from Ukraine does not give rise to negative reactions in Finland and is not perceived as a source of insecurity. But what causes more concern in the country is the fact that from summer 2023, Russia allowed and even pushed immigrants from Middle East and Africa to cross the border with Finland. At the same time, people from Russia tried to enter Finland through the Arctic. So there is an instrumentalization by Russia of immigration and this instrumentalization of immigration by Russia, of course, fuels the feeling of fear in Finland, and with it, the anti-immigration rhetoric of the Finns party. And this is, and it led the government to take immediately measures to close the border with Russia. Regarding Sweden, the war in Ukraine has indirectly put the country in danger. Actually, Sweden has experienced growing insecurity for some years, with, as I mentioned, it's the second highest gun crime death rate in Europe. Much of this violence has nothing to do with the war in Ukraine, but is rather linked to drug and gun crimes. And we know that this plays a big role in the good results of the Sweden Democrats. But the feeling of insecurity has been heightened by several attacks on Swedish interests abroad in the context of Sweden's bid to join NATO. These attacks have to do with the reluctance of Turkey to ratify the admission of Sweden into NATO. Against this backdrop, a far-right politician burned the Quran in front of the Turkish embassy in Stockholm, and because the law in Sweden allows us to do that. And in reaction, several Swedish diplomatic representations in the Middle East came under attack over the summer 2023. And in Belgium, two Swedes were even killed in the framework of a soccer competition, I think. And the argument that was given was the fact that in Sweden, you can burn the Quran. And once more, the Quran had been burned because in the context where Turkey didn't want to ratify the admission of Sweden into NATO. So there is a very indirect link between the war in Ukraine and these events, but these events, of course, have reinforced polarization in the country. The government wanted to amend the law to prohibit the desecration of any sacred books, but the Sweden Democrats, on which the government depend at the parliament, defended the Swedish perspective about freedom of speech, and so the law hasn't changed yet, a difference with Denmark. As in the case of Finland, Russia does not seem entirely foreign to these attacks against Swedish representations abroad. According to the Swedish government, Russia has also sought to use its networks to fan the flames of conflict between long-settled Swedes and newcomers. So the Kremlin would aim to destabilize the country, which has strongly supported Ukraine's Russian invasion in February 2022. Well, I'm almost done. We could think that such events would fuel the vote for the Finns party as well as the Sweden Democrats, considering their stance on immigration and their anti-foreigners discourses. But that's not what the results of the last European elections show. Of course, we can't compare the results of national and European elections. There are many reasons that can explain the difference of votes between last national elections in Finland, Sweden, and last European elections. Nevertheless, the relatively low results of the Finns party and the Sweden Democrats are striking. The Finns party even lost one of its 2 seats at the European Parliament. And what strikes even more in Finland is a good result of the Left Alliance, and whose leader firmly rejects the ongoing attacks on immigrants and calls for nuance in international relations. So what conclusion can we draw? And so I'm almost done, Maricel. What conclusion can we draw from this presentation? Considering all the data I gathered, it is not it is not easy to establish a link between the war in Ukraine and polarization in both Finland and Sweden. The war in Ukraine probably fuels the vote for the far-right parties and hence fosters polarization, especially since we can notice that the Finns party and the Sweden Democrats are the less in favor of allowing Ukrainian refugees to enter the country. They are more opposed to accepting higher energy costs due to the sanctions imposed on Russia. They are opposed to the membership of Ukraine in the European Union. And so they have positions that are quite different from the other parties regarding the war in Ukraine, or subjects linked to the war in Ukraine. But nothing enables us to say that most of their voters chose them because of these positions regarding the war. My conclusion is that it's above all the sense of vulnerability the war generates that makes the war in Ukraine a contributing factor to the war, to the polarization. Thanks.
So now we have some questions. We will open the floor to a question. So if you have some questions, you can put them in the room. I don't know. If not, we have some questions on the chat. Maybe Clément, I don't know if you will read some. Can you read some of the questions on the chat? You cannot see it. Okay, yeah, it's not a problem. There are some questions on the chat, so I can read them for all. There are some questions on the room here. Not. Well. So there's one question of Rocio. She has 2 questions. So maybe you can also take the micro, Rocio, and put yourself the questions, or if not, I can read them. Some strange noise. Well, I will read them. So
sorry.
Yes.
Do you prefer that I read them?
You can read them. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's better.
Okay. For Isil, I want to ask you, who or what promotes, I love this concept of a comunicación or a communication, a communication. But I want to know a little more about who or what promotes the a communication, and if the concept of communication behind the idea of a communication imply that communication is similar to deliberation. It's an extension concept of communication. That's my idea and my question. And for Cassie, I want to ask him if the polarization linked to the, I don't know the term, the working class or the BC, about that he talking about, is a different type of polarization than the value-based or attitudinal polarization that is so whispered today, or in the case of India, is it framed in terms of identity recognition? I don't know if maybe I'm more clear in writing, because with my pronunciation, I don't know if it's clear.
It's okay. It's
okay. Thank you.
I think it's clear. Maybe we can now read also the questions of Cassie. I don't know if Cassie is connected, but he's asking also a question to about to Rocio, about the idea of affective polarization. If Rocio, you can say something more about this concept of affective polarization. And he has another question to Isil. Maybe we can sum this question too, and then Isil, you take some minutes to answer. So the question to Isil is polarization hampers communication, or communication helps to polarization in the current political scenarios of Turkey and elsewhere? So I have some questions also for all the panel and for Isil. Maybe if you can say something more, but really quickly about voters and the relationship between right-wing ideology. In the case of Rocio, she says that these voters are not a direct connection with the right-wing ideology. And what about the voters in Turkey? Yeah, that's the question. And then maybe we can yeah, you can take. You can start and in the order, and then Cassie, you can take also the micro to answer your questions, and then Sophie, I have some questions for you also. Thank you.
So thank you for all the questions. So I will start with the questions of Rocio. So who promotes the communication? So basically the political leaders. So I think my suggestion and my idea, my hypothesis is that it's coming from the top. It's a very top-down movement, style, rhetoric. So who promotes? It's promoted by political leaders, especially during election times, electoral periods. It's become more and more developed and promoted by leaders. So the communication, it's coming from the top. So it implies deliberation. No, it is not related with deliberation, because in the deliberation we have to understand each other even if we are not in the same point. Because the communication is like this. We are not sharing the same points. We are contradicting. We have different opinions, but nevertheless, we can talk. We can exchange. The deliberation implies that. In the case of a communication explained by Dominique Bolton, this is not my concept, so I'm referring to him. he said it's not about the understanding, mutual understanding. So he explains through conflict, through the division, that replace the efforts to understand each other. So this notion is really related with alterity and with rejection, with denial of communication. So in Turkey, we are at this point, so we are very far from understanding each other. Some leader talk, some other one try to respond to him, and he's tried to legitimate himself because he is very under attack. So especially during election times, it's really about attacking the other. So it's perhaps you may say that everywhere is like this, but it's becoming more and more deep and problematic with the fake news that Rocio and you mentioned about it during your presentation, with fake news, with manufactured consent, manufactured videos. So I have lots of things to say about the last elections, but I don't have so much time. But so we saw very lots of manufactured videos and photos putting the leader of the opposition with terrorists, with PKK terrorists. So these are very nonsense communication. So that's why our communication, it's not related with deliberation. So there is no room for negotiation. For Cassie's question, so polarization blocks communication or communication helps to polarization. So it's very a vicious circle. We are in a vicious circle. So more and more we see polarization, and this polarization become more accurate with a communication. So a communication blocks or helps to the polarization, and with all this source of populism, it becomes bigger and bigger. So it is a very vicious circle, cercle vicieux. Donc, so communication could not help positively to polarization, because in the case of Turkey, we cannot really talk about the communication or compromise and understanding. So in the situation of our communication, we are more on the polarized side. So for your question, Maricel, which is a very good one also, so voters and the political behavior of young people, when you say voters, and the right-wing ideology. So I'm not sure. I don't have very good data because my research was on a very small group. So that's why it's a preliminary research. So I want to widen it, and with a more focus groups and qualitative face-to-face interviews. So as I had the idea from my data that they are not inclined, the young people in Turkey, they are not directly or fully inclined to right-wing ideology. So as Rocio said, so this is not related with ideology, but this is related also for Turkey with policies, the liberty, the young people. Even there are economic problems, huge economic problems for youth as well, for everyone in the country, but for youth as well. They are more adapting these post-materialistic values, which means they want their liberty, they want equity, they want justice. So these are more post-materialistic values, even if they have very big problems, economic problems. So they are not explaining, or they are not aligning like their families, like their previous generations, through ideology. So they have different perception of ideology. I think they do not classify like right wing, left wing, like the previous generations. So I'm agree on that. I don't have any data on Turkey on that, but this is not the ideology, but this is other values, other democratic values that I want to promote. So yeah. I'm open to other questions as well. So
Right.
thank you. Thank you very much.
You So maybe Cassie, you want to answer some of your
Yes.
questions? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Hi. Yeah, Rocio, because I was focusing actually how the underprivileged classes or what I'm calling backward classes are because moving towards, because polarization, how is making them to move
I'm sorry,
from
Cassie. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we cannot see your image. It's okay if
yeah, yes, yeah, just a minute, yes.
maybe it's great.
Yeah,
Pardon.
sorry,
Like
because
that.
there is some technical issue. So then I
Okay.
was, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Okay. Yeah,
I
thank
was
you very much.
I was I was I was trying to focus actually how this polarization is forcing underprivileged classes, especially in during the elections time in general and also otherwise actually. So this is especially because when right wing governments are there now across, because I was thinking originally in India only, but all over the world we see that presence of right-wing governments now in this kind of scenario, because all these right-wing governments, what they are not worried about the welfare agenda of the people, because they were all because especially I was focusing on India. There is a shift from welfareism to the multinational corporations, where because of that these people are affecting so much. So and also the parties initiated by these backward class leaders also, in order to survive in the current scenario, they are also supporting or going with the aligning with the right wing governments, especially current NDA or BJP government. That is what the crux I want to convey from my presentation, Rocio. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. So maybe Rocio, you would like to answer? You have a question about the affective the concept of affective polarization? Yes, if you can.
Okay, I was
Yeah.
muted.
Thanks.
Yes, it's a type, affective polarization is a type of polarization that is based more on feelings, as I know, that on the rationalization of political positions. Like it's frequently opposite to pure ideological polarization. This concept emphasizes the increase in positive feelings towards the one's own group or identity, and negative feelings towards the what is called the out group, the exo group. In my opinion, this type of polarization is encouraged when articulations of different positions are legitimized from power. It's like a logic, like if you like Milei, for example, you are against abortion rights, and you resent progressivism or cultural Marxism, and that means being right wing, and that is something to be proud of. It's not a shame. So like that, the leader's discourse legitimize these articulations of feelings. And for the second question, Cassie, as far as I know, the United States is the typical case of affective polarization, and the one that inspired the concept. But however, it is also discussed by some research in Brazil, for example, with Bolsonaro, in Chile with Cast, and in Spain with Vox. In general, in countries where far-right political forces have been growing last years. I think Argentina is not the only case. Anyway, I don't know if it was clear.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocio. I had another question to you about this idea of your thesis, your hypothesis, your idea about the role of the presidents in this rise of polarization. And I would like to know if in fostering polarization from power, did you find something about the role of traditional media or not? Is traditional media in the also, in fact, have they a role to play in this rise of polarization, or is just Twitter and all
But
of the social media? I don't know if it...
Sorry, I didn't hear very well the first question. That you
in the is the just I said that it's your idea about the polarization from power, the polarization, the role of the presidents in this rise of polarization. So I would like to know if there is some data or some evidence about the role of the traditional media in this. Like, for instance, when you say the state inefficiency, that this discourse of a lot of young people in Argentina about the state inefficiency, is there some role of the media, of the traditional media, in this in spreading this kind of discourse, or not? What do you think about?
Of course, yeah. I think that the traditional media was very important in the emergence of Milei leadership and the quickly celebrity, because he was precisely a celebrity person in the traditional media. As I said during the campaign, for example, he used social media, but not so much. He was more like a TV person, like a TV celebrity. He was invited to entertainment and political talk shows, and he became famous because of that. And then there was in parallel like an army of trolls and different accounts that were making cuts or recortes, like parts of the speech in the traditional media, and spread this on the social media. But I think that, for example, the discourse about the inefficiency of the state is not necessary in the point of polarization. This is, for example, an opinion that people can sustain, but the polarization, and mostly the affective polarization, is more like the articulation of different issues, of different feelings. That was something that I don't find. I didn't find in the focus group, but in the social media, there is a strategy, a very powerful strategy, for fostering affective polarization with trolling campaign and fake news campaign. Is like that is really more intense than in the traditional media. The traditional media had a role, but I don't know if it can be so easily associated with this strategy on social media, because it's like is favored also by the algorithm. So it's I don't know. I think there is clearly a difference in the scale of the role of the media. I am not sure here to answer about the difference in the type of in the gender. Sorry. In a scale is much more important the social media, but I am not sure about the gender of the difference in the type of role in promoting polarization. Sorry.
Great. No,
I don't know if the answer, but
it's really clear. Thank you very much. So maybe I had another other questions, but I would like to listen to Sofia also. So there is a question from Cassie, I think, here in the chat. So Cassie says, your presentation is very interesting, especially, Sofia, in the times of war in Ukraine and polarization. Can you explain how do we understand the situation in Gaza and now Iran is entering into the situation of war will lead to the Third World War in the case of Middle East? The question or crisis of Middle East. And I would like to add another question if you allow me. So a question about the, you said finally the question of polarization in Finland and Sweden is a matter of cultural issues, if I understood, cultural issues, I mean immigration and all of that. But I was wondering, what is the reality of that kind of immigration issue in those countries? This is one question. And the other one is how can we measure, how can we obtain data about fears? It's a question that I have. I think we have not the answer, or there's no one only answer at that question, but I will be really interested in knowing how we can measure those kind of feelings, those kind of affective feelings. So because it's a kind of discourse, like a declaration of people.
Sure. So thanks for these questions. Just since I'm speaking just after Rosillo, I just want to give some just information regarding the use of social media as well in the polarization and the countries I study, because I don't only study Finland and Sweden, but also other countries where there is polarization, especially Austria, and in all of them, there is the far right parties use a lot social media for their campaign, and even regarding the Sweden Democrats, they have been accused very recently of having used like farm chores to send to be present in social medias, and this likes you call them, I think, satellite groups. Rosillo, it's almost the same regarding the Sweden Democrats. It seems that they develop fake news. So just to say that we can see also the use of social media by far-right parties is very high in the European countries I study. That was just regarding Cassie's question. So from what I know, the situation in the Middle East may have played a role, especially in Sweden, where there is a tradition of the country has a tradition of being more being closer, to I would say to the Palestinians or whatever. But what is interesting is the debate that occurred during the European elections. As in France, the left alliance in Sweden focused not on the war in Ukraine, but on the war in Gaza, and much more than on the war in Ukraine. But I don't have any. I don't have enough data to say that may have played a role in the choice of voters.